Creepers left to rise, buzz like crazy. Everybody's trying to stimulate it. Spiders in the mirror and feel this can't be right. Back to the scene of a Friday night, to a blessed collision still frozen tight. Spear drinkers, Cupid and the sound of her first chime. And why did you argue?
Good morning, friends. Y'all, I literally spent I probably spent like 3 minutes trying to get this camera set up. Good morning. We're back in my truck, starting another reading vlog, and yeah, I am excited. Oh. Wow, that was I don't know, maybe you'll fall again. Don't fall. I need a new tripod. Anyway, hello, welcome. So, I toyed with the idea of doing a themed reading vlog this week. I gotta admit that I have definitely felt a little bit of a book slump, like, hovering in the background, where for the last few weeks I'll find a few books that are just, like, fantastic. I love them, you know, like 5 stars, 6 stars. And then I'll find a few that either I end up DNFing last week, or they're like a 3-star and I sort of feel like, I feel like I wasted my time on that book, you know? So, I don't know. I feel like the TBR I had planned for August is kind of out the window so far. I'm totally mood reading right now, and that's okay, because honestly, like, the thing that I feel like can be difficult if you are any type of like a book influencer, which I say that with like the utmost tongue-in-cheek because I realize I am a baby book influencer here, is that there's always this simultaneous pressure of wanting to read new books to recommend, but also like just reading what you want. And so this always makes me come back and reflect on the number one reason I had a Bookstagram first, and then I started a BookTube, is because this is my hobby, this is my fun time, this is doing stuff that I want to do, this is stress relief, this is joy, this is fun, and I have to keep that reminder that talking about the books that I read is fun. It's supposed to be fun, and if it's not, then I need to do something different. So there you go, that is my monologue as to why I'm mood reading. But that being said, I toyed with the idea of sort of doing a taboo or a dark romance reading vlog this week, and that's largely because there are several books, 2 basically books at the top of my TBR, my new TBR that's in my head, my mood reading TBR that I really want to read, and one of those that kept calling my name is Priest by Sierra Simone. I have never read Sierra Simone before. I have honestly been a little wary of her. I have worried. If you've watched any of my videos in the past, you know that I am not a fan of straight up erotica. I really need a good blend of romance and love, relationship building, story, character development, and steam. And I have heard, and this is coming from zero experience, that Sierra Simone is definitely more of an erotica writer. And that's just not usually something that I want to do. But I kept coming back to Priest, having it in the back of my head, thinking like, I really want to try that. I'm really curious about it. It's been hyped up on TikTok recently, where most people talk about how steamy it is, and that's not really what intrigued me. But the thing that intrigued me the most, I think, is knowing the people that I'm close friends with. Like, I'm going to use Jen from the book Refuge, and I'm going to use Emily as an example from the novel Cauldron. I know that they both dearly love this book, and I also know that they would not recommend a book or suggest a book to me if it was straight up erotica, because they know that that's not something that I like. And I'm not judging at all, I'm just saying these are my personal tastes. So, this is a very long intro. The point is, I started reading Priest. I started it and I stopped it because I got nervous. I started it again. And the reason that I'm nervous specifically about Priest is because this is a love story, a romance novel, an erotic romance. It's not erotica. I was talking with Jen from the book Refuge today, and we were kind of discussing about the differences in there, and I agree with her opinion that while this does have an emphasis on erotic and steamy scenes, it is also an erotic romance, and that it's very much using the story of these characters to tell an overall bigger picture story, and it's not purely erotica. So that being said, so I've been nervous about this because this is a very steamy romance featuring a priest who falls in love with a woman. He's a Catholic priest, so he has taken a vow of celibacy, and he is not supposed to have that type of relationship. Now, I will say that I am not Catholic. I am Christian, and my religion is different than, very different than the Catholic religion. So, but I was still really worried that anything involving like vows or men of the cloth, I was very worried about how I would feel about that personally. And I was nervous. So that was my main hold up on that. But from the minute I started reading this book, I was wowed at how beautiful it is. The writing is just so completely stunning. The writing is stunning, but something else that is really well done here is the depth of characterization. This book is told entirely from Father Bell's point of view, Tyler's point of view, even though I have been listening to the audiobook, and when Poppy, the heroine, goes to confession, there's a female narrator for her voice, which is really well done. But the whole book is really seeing Tyler, Father Bell's inner struggle with being a priest and wanting to bring people to God, and also really struggling with his mortal self. Like, he wants to have a sexual relationship. He's extremely attracted to Poppy, specifically Poppy. And Poppy is a very interesting character too, because she is basically a very privileged rich girl who comes, she went to like an Ivy League school, like her future was set up and mapped, and she sort of abandoned that in favor of basically working at a really, really upscale sex club. And she is a woman who comes to confession to tell of a sin that happened with her and a married man. But the thing that I really love about her is how she is very open and honest and accepting about the part of her that loves and enjoys the physical relationship with a man. And she is not ashamed of that. She accepts that. She accepts that's a part of who she is. And she sort of really has this beautiful sense of ownership over that, where she is not going to let that desire or those feelings be a cause of shame for her. She's not going to let other people shame her for that. Like, she's really powerfully in her own power, I guess, in that way. She owns that. And she is honestly just a really fascinating character. So it's their love story, their romance, and Tyler really has an interesting backstory too that I will get into in a later clip. I'm going to leave this clip here, but I will say that I am deeply invested in these characters' lives. It is beautifully written. It is very emotionally complex. The steam in here is wonderful too, but it's just such a richly layered, nuanced story of this priest's life who is struggling with a lot of his desires and how to reconcile that with his desire to still bring people to God. So I'm fascinated by this, honestly. I'm just utterly fascinated with it. So I feel like this book has the potential to be a 5-star read, and that is really pretty shocking for me. So I'm excited to keep reading. I'll keep you guys updated once I finish, because I'm sure I'll have a lot to say. Hello, my friends. Well, I finished Priest, and I really, truly enjoyed this book a lot. I feel like this is an excellent book to have for like a book club. I think this would make for such an interesting discussion piece, and I feel like it's a little bit heart-achingly beautiful. Like, I feel like it has a little bit of a melancholy vibe to it. But ultimately you do get a happily ever after, and so I feel like that is so fulfilling. Like, I truly loved that. Watching this journey of Father Bell really progress, watching him really go through basically a crisis of faith is what, well, I don't even know if that's exactly what it is, because I do think, and this is where I think that you could have some really interesting discussions, is that I don't feel like he ever did have a crisis of faith. I feel like his faith in God was always so strong the whole way through. And I think that there were some truly, truly beautiful moments in here, like right before everything happens in the final conflict. He's addressing his congregation and he's talking to them about a God who... Let me see if I can find the quote. So I'm going to read you this little part because this, to me, is exactly what this book was about, and this is what I felt like was so completely beautiful about it. So he's addressing his congregation, and he's getting ready, basically, to leave the priesthood, to leave his flock, and he's talking to them about how people believe, basically, like, what they believe that sin, how that separates them from God, and how sometimes they feel like there's no coming back. And he said, he references a scripture. He said, "This passage has been used by many clergy as a platform for condemnation, the ultimate declaration by Jesus that we are to abandon any and all temptations lest we lose our chance of salvation. And my old homily was not far away from this idea that self-denial and the constant shunning of temptation is the path to heaven, our way to the small and narrow gate. I glanced down at my hands resting on top of the lectern at the lectionary in front of me, but then I realized that the danger of preaching this was that you might walk out of this building today with an image of God as a small and narrow God. A God as small and narrow as that gate. I realized that you could walk out of here and believe, really and truly believe, that if you fail once, if you slip and act like the messy, flawed human that you are, that God doesn't want you." And I cannot even articulate how deeply that hit my soul. You know? I feel like I definitely feel this is taboo for a reason, right? Like, this book is definitely not going to hit everyone the same way. Like, you can go on Goodreads, you can hear people's experiences. Some people DNF it at the first page. Some people really rake it over the coals. And for other people, it's a beautifully glowing 5-star review. Some people focus only on the steam, which is really good steam. And it's a really heavy emphasis in the story. But to me, this entire book is really Tyler's journey and him trying to figure out what his relationship with God is now and what he wants that to be and how he can live a life that is happy and still have a relationship with God. And I feel like that is so beautiful. You know, I think that if you are a person who has maybe a Christian basis in your faith and if you have ever struggled in your faith, if you have ever maybe questioned or doubted, specifically, I think that God loves you. And like that passage just said about the messiness and you sin one time and it's done. And I feel like so many people in a lot of Christian faiths believe that, you know. But I have never felt okay with that idea. I have never felt like that is true, you know? I know we're talking a lot about religions, but that's the basis of the book. And quite personally, I have struggled in my faith, you know? Probably more in the last year than I ever have before. And so this book really hit home to me in a really powerful way. It was beautiful, and it was heart-aching, and it was hopeful, you know? I loved it. I think that when we hear... Recently, this book has kind of blown up on TikTok specifically. And whenever I hear people talking about it, and I know you only get like a certain amount of time on TikTok, but the focus is always on the sex scenes and how spicy they are and how steamy they are, and that's true. They absolutely are. And the taboo element of a priest being with a woman when he's taken a vow of celibacy adds to that, right? But they're such a crucial part to building this character of Tyler and Poppy, building their relationship. Every single sex scene is serving a purpose in building that story and adding layers to their relationship and Tyler's struggle, you know? It was honestly pretty much perfection. Like, when I finished this book, I was thinking maybe it's a 4-star, you know? Because the one thing that I feel like is lacking in here is the really, like, the swoony romantic falling in love aspect. which is what I always want in a romance. So I feel like that is the weak point in this book. But if you look at it from this specific relationship of Poppy and Father Bell, and how it grows and how they express love for one another, almost every single moment when they are falling in love happens through sex. So I feel like that's a really, really powerful message here too, that adds an extra layer and depth to Tyler's character and his struggle in his calling, I guess, in his faith. And it was just incredibly intriguing, interesting. I was riveted in this story. I just wanted to, like, I was so invested in every single thought that he had and everything that he was trying to, because you're in his point of view the whole time, you're really going along through it with him as he's really trying to make sense and decide what he's going to do and how he's going to do it and how he's going to live. And it was just, honestly, it feels very much like a masterpiece. You know, I will say for sure that I could see how if you were a Catholic, a really, you know, like, I don't really know anything about Catholics, that religion, but there are definitely some physical scenes in here involving things that are probably like holy objects or holy places, so I could see how that would be really upsetting for sure. But from an outsider's point of view, I don't hold those things as holy, and so it wasn't offensive to me, you know what I mean? It was that this book is going to stick with me forever, honestly. Like, I can't get over it. So initially I was thinking 4 stars, but like, this is the type of book that you just can't stop thinking about. Like, that I feel like I'm going to forever remember this, and I want to reread it. It was just beautiful, so rich and meaty and just full of things that I feel make a romance great. So 5 stars, honestly. Just so moved by it, but not necessarily in the same way, not at all in the same way that I'm moved by a really beautiful Kennedy Ryan or a really beautiful Lisa Kleypas. Those that just like hit you in your soul and make you feel the great, like, hope of that true love, you know? This is very different from that. That's not the same feeling at all that I get here. But this is very gritty, and it really goes to those dark, it's not necessarily dark as in like a lot of bad things happen, but it's dark as in it explores those dark parts of your mind that maybe you don't let yourself consider, or things that you struggle with that you don't want to admit to people. And it was just powerful. So this book was incredible. 5 stars. I can definitely see how this would not be for everyone, for sure. For sure. But I think that if you approach it in a way willing to, like, be open about it, you know, if you want, like, if you don't want to, if it's not for you, move it on by, you know, because I do that with books too. But wow, has this book left an impression on me, just truly unforgettable, you know? And I do want to say that in a few videos that I've made recently, I've said, you know, I don't like this, and I don't like this, and I'll DNF a book for this, and everyone is allowed those things in books that they don't want to read about. And just because you don't want to read about those things, it doesn't mean that you're not this adventurous or this great or this grown-up reader, you know? Any more than it makes someone who likes those things a dirty reader, you know what I mean? I feel like there are 2 sides of that coin. When someone says they're not interested, they're not comfortable in reading these things, you have the other team who's like, well, I can handle it, you know? But then again, you have other people who look at people who say they can handle it, and they're like, what is wrong with you, you know? So I feel like that needs to stop all around. Because it doesn't mean that one person is a better reader, a greater reader, a more critical reader. It is literally everyone's individual personal experiences, things that they want to think about, things that they want to consider, things that they want to feel or not. And that's valid, straight through. So wow, I did not intend to spend 20 minutes talking about this book, but I think that this is a book that I would very cautiously recommend to others, you know, because I could definitely see how it's not going to be for everyone, you know. But as someone who is a religious person, I think that she handled this with great care, quite honestly. I feel like she really did. And I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was real. I truly loved it. It was fantastic. So, yeah, I think that if you're reading this book purely for what you hear about the steam, I think you're missing a lot of really amazingly beautiful insights to very flawed humans. Because that is what hit me, you know. I just loved it. Wow. I'm so glad I picked this up, you know? Like, I've been very curious about it for a long time, but I've been very scared in a way in that I didn't want to... I was really worried about how it was going to be portrayed, you know? I didn't want to see something that I consider so special to be treated negatively or to be treated... I don't know, just in a real bad light. And for me, I don't think that it was, but again, I'm not this specific religion. I just believe in God, and it was beautiful. So, definitely well worth the read. I don't know. I don't know that I could recommend it to you unless I knew you personally, but wow. I'll never forget it. It's just one of those books that moved me in a way that I was not expecting to be moved. So, beautiful. Beautifully done. Big fan of this author now, and I'm excited to read more. So I have no idea what I'm going to read next. I honestly have no idea. And, yeah, we'll see. I'll have, in my next update, I'll let you know what I picked and what I'm feeling about it so far. Hello, my friends. Welcome back for a vlog update. So, I had a few options last night. Well, I mean, obviously I have like endless options, but what I was really in the mood for to pick up after I finished Priest, I kind of really desperately wanted to start Sinner, the next book. I know Midnight Mass is the novella that carries on after Priest, but I wanted an audiobook, and so I thought maybe I would go with Sinner. But then I decided that since I'm kind of in a darker romance mood, like a taboo romance mood, I thought I would go with a book that is recently been moved up to a high spot on my TBR, and that is Dark Notes by Pam Godwin. I am going to be on Jen's channel, Jen from the Book Refuge, at the end of August, with an author chat that she's going to have with Pam Godwin, and I am extremely excited about that. And so I want to read more of her books, and this is one that I have really been wanting to read, but I've also been a little nervous to read it. Like, I definitely feel like the only other book that I've read by Pam Godwin is Sea of Ruin, and I absolutely love that. That was one of my favorite books of last year. I thought it was beautiful and powerful, but also heavy. I feel like Pam Godwin's books go, like, she treads to a very dark place, and a place of almost like extreme hopelessness with her heroines, but then she's able to, at least this was my experience with Sea of Ruin, but then she's able to really pull them out of there in a beautiful and realistic way, and I really, really loved that. So I decided, since I was kind of in this mood, that I would go with that. And I think it's interesting that if you watched last week's vlog, you saw how I talked about I was kind of in a mood for a thriller, like I've kind of been wanting a thriller, and I started one and DNF'd it because it was too gory for me, and I did not want to read that or be in that headspace. And so this week, going with more of like the Taboo, and they're like, Priest wasn't a dark romance, but it did have a little bit of a melancholy, broody, atmospheric vibe to it that sort of reminded me of fall, and so I feel like that is really hitting that desire that I had for a thriller. So I started Dark Notes. I am on chapter 10. I'm listening to the audio, and this is a dark romance. This is also a taboo romance. So the heroine in this is Ivory, and she is 17, and she is at a high school for the arts. She is a gifted piano player, and her father was sort of a celebrated jazz musician, and he was killed, and so she is only living with her mother and her brother. Now, her father ended up selling his business and using all of that money to get Ivory into this very exclusive private school for the arts. And her mother definitely has resented that fact and really has kind of taken the path of absolute least resistance and doesn't do anything at all for Ivory or for finances, you know? So Ivory is a very interesting character. She is 17, but her body is definitely the body of a woman. Like it's described, she's a very voluptuous woman. Like she has the type of body that men are just sort of naturally attracted to and drawn to. And the thing that I think makes this so interesting with her is that Ivory, in the situation that she's in where she cannot pay for her school tuition anymore, no one is working to pay for the mortgage or the electricity or anything like that, the groceries. So she is 17, and she is using the only currency that she has available to her, which is her body. And so she basically sells that to earn money to pay for her spot on the school or to help, you know, like that alone is very heartbreaking. But when the scenes are described, when she's going through that, when the scenes are described, it's very, very gut-wrenching because it's so clear that every interaction that Ivory has ever had has been at best transactional and at worst violent and painful. So her entire concept of physical intimacy is, or I guess sex, because there's nothing intimate about this, is really just that this is a means to an end, a way for her to provide for her family and to get her out of this situation and to keep her in school so that she can progress. And at times that can be, I mean, it's a heavy topic, it's a heavy subject matter, but I also, like, I'm very excited to see her sort of have that shift in awareness of everything being negative about that, and her body being a real negative in that it draws the type of attention that she does not want and that she does not like, but at the same time she uses that attention to live, you know, like it's sad, but also it's beautifully written. And I feel like Pam Godwin has this way of writing where she can be writing a somewhat innocuous scene, just going along in this little scene that doesn't seem like it's especially heavy. It doesn't seem like it's going to be violent. And then she'll hit you with this word or phrase that she uses that conveys exactly the ugly reality of what's happening to Ivory, you know? And I think that is just kind of an amazing thing for a writer to do. So the hero in this book is undoubtedly going to be her teacher, who is new to the school. He is a new teacher, and he is an interesting character as well, because when he first meets Ivory, he is attracted to her, and he believes that she is another teacher because she looks so mature. She doesn't look like a child. She doesn't look like a teenager. She looks like a woman. And then when he realizes that she's a student, he's like, oh, okay, like immediately put off. But he keeps feeling this draw towards her and a little bit of protectiveness as their relationship starts to progress, and you see he's starting to realize what is happening in her home life. Not all of it at the point where I'm at. He's just starting to realize what's happening. You can see that he is developing a lot of protectiveness of her. But the really interesting thing about him is that he is definitely a dominant hero. He's a dominant man. And when he first sees Ivory and he notices that she averts her eyes, like doesn't make eye contact, like he is attracted to that and drawn to that because those are signs that she would be submissive to him. So I'm really curious and interested to know how this romance is going to develop, and I feel like this is something that I am really interested in right now, are these complex, very sort of twisted dynamics that these people have in their own lives and issues that they're working through, and how is that going to make these two people come together and have a romance or a relationship that's going to work? How are they going to work through the trauma? Ivory, for one, you know, like there's one of the things that gets her through the darkest moments when she is working using her body is that she turns her brain off and will go through the notes for piano music in her head, and it's just heartbreakingly sad. But I am fully convinced, I am 100% convinced that Pam Godwin will be able to make this story beautifully triumphant and satisfying for me. Like, I know that is what my experience with Sea of Ruin was, and I know that a lot of people say that Sea of Ruin isn't very dark. For me it was, as someone who doesn't read a lot of dark romance, I felt like it went to a very dark place, but then was pulled dramatically out of that into a place of triumph and love, and I really loved that so much. So I'm expecting that type of experience to happen as I read this book, and I'm really excited about it. So I'm enjoying it with some trepidation because I know there's going to be heartache ahead, but also very excited, very interested to see what happens. Good morning, my friends. This light is from it's super sunny here. It is kind of early in the morning, and yeah, my blinds are giving this weird light pattern. Let me see if I can fix it. Nope, nothing I can do. That's it. It's just gonna look like I've got oddly dyed hair. Anyway, I finished Dark Notes last night by Pam Godwin, and I have to say that I absolutely loved this book. I loved this book so much. This is a 5-star read, and this, honestly, has really made me, this whole week, but especially this book, has made me really appreciate and really hunger for more dark romance. Like, I feel like I have not really ever been a huge lover of dark romance. I talked about this earlier, but I think sometimes dark romance can get lumped into either one of two, into a certain type of category, which is usually either just high levels of heat or different types of sexual activity, and I feel like sometimes that can be seen as like a shock value, or they just kind of like load them with I feel like this is, I'm not saying this is what dark romance is, I'm saying this is sort of what I feel like my perception of it has been in the past. Or it's just loaded with trauma, you know? And and I feel like my opinion of that has been some of the books that I've read that fit into that specific type of vibe aren't really for me, and I'm going to say that they're still not really for me, because I need, if you've been here for a while and you've watched my vlogs, you've probably noticed that I come back again and again for the same thing that I love in my romances, and specifically in the stories that I enjoy. And that's really emotional complexity. That's different layers in the relationship that are building on that complexity, that they're working through some issues. Like, I feel like there are parallels in my favorite contemporary romances and my favorite historical romances. It's usually that they are overcoming something either together in their relationship or individually, but that the relationship adds a dimension to that. Like, I really love watching or reading stories about people overcoming difficulties and having that really, like, especially when it's a couple and they sort of work on, like, that is the thing that empowers them, that's the thing that makes their relationship stronger, you know? Like, I just love that so much. And I feel like I have not come across that often in dark romance because I wasn't finding that type of dark romance, you know what I mean? And I think that this is something that I talked about on my Instagram stories last week, is that it's been a year. August 12th is when I posted my very first booktube video. I was pretty active in the book community before that. I had a bookstagram. I used to have a book review blog for YA books a long time ago. I have a new book blog that is all just about the romance books that I'm reading now. So, like, I've been on Goodreads since 2010, you know, like, I'm not new to the book community, to the online book community. Something that is new to me, however, is talking like this about books as I'm reading them, trying to vocalize how I'm feeling about the book, and trying to put into words why it's working for me and why it's not working for me. And I feel like this skill has taken me a year to really develop, and I feel like getting that skill up there, or working on that skill, has also allowed me to really fine-tune books that I love and try to find them better, you know? I think that it's very common to just hear a book talked about that's getting a lot of love and to pick that book up because other people love it, so you assume that you're going to love it too. Maybe not realizing that something in that book is really specifically not going to work for you. You know what I mean? And so I think that this week, this experience, something that I have really loved in these books that I have read is they all deal with very nuanced characters that are dealing with some sort of really heavy emotional type of choices, and I don't want to say damage or trauma, because it's not always that. It's something that they're struggling with internally. They have this big internal struggle. But it's the way that it's, like, manifested, or the way that they're working through that, is specifically through their romance. You know, I think that was what was happening in Priest, and that is a big part of Dark Notes. But let's talk about Dark Notes. 5 stars. I adored this book. I thought this book was so well done. I felt like this book was so powerful. It was just a beautifully dark, tragic in a lot of ways, but ultimately hopeful book. Like, this book really treads through some dark things with Ivory. And I can't believe I forgot his name. This book really treads through some really dark times that Ivory is going through. And I think one of the things that makes this book work for me so well is that the power dynamics in this book are very interesting to me. In the beginning, Ivory holds what power she can because of her body and what she is willing to use that as a currency to survive. But then when Emmerich enters the picture, who is her teacher, that power dynamic really shifts, and she gives up her currency when he asks her to, and allows him to sort of step in and take care of the things that she was taking care of before. And her placing that trust with him and allowing him to sort of shoulder that burden is the very beginning of watching their relationship grow. I think that this book says a lot about the healing power of physical intimacy, and in very different ways, sometimes how pain and pleasure kind of verge together and how that can actually be a really healing process, which I thought was beautifully well done. I feel like this book on the cover, it is taboo in the way in that she is his student and she is underage. And also, here is an example of a book having something that I typically avoid, and that is books that have teenage characters in a high school setting with adult themes, you know. I usually really don't like reading those books. This is a classic example of a book with a trope or a setup that I don't like that worked for me really, really well. And it's all because of how Pam Godwin handled this subject matter. It was just honestly beautifully done. It was masterfully written. It was just gorgeous, you know. It was honestly, it was very high heat, but it was also like filled with all of these other like, you know, small little interactions between Emmerich and Ivory, where Emmerich is essentially an alpha in every sense of the word. He's an alpha and he's a dom, but he's an alpha in the literal best definition of that word, in that he is an alpha and he wants and dominant, but he takes care of Ivory in every way. Her comfort is his number one concern. Her protection, her safety is his number one concern, and he always makes sure that she is taken care of. So in that way, I think Emmerich is one of the best alphas that I've ever read about. He was just fantastic. I loved it. I loved it so much. And I also want to say, I know I'm talking so much, this vlog is going to be forever long. And I'm only going to include these two books because I just have not been able to shut up about them. I feel like this week I have really been processing a lot of feelings about the books that I'm reading, the books that I want to read, and where I kind of see my reading path going. And I think that something that is really interesting is if you've watched the last few weeks of my weekly reading vlogs, you can see that I've definitely struggled with feeling reading slumps coming pretty frequently, you know? And this is one of those weeks where I feel like I have really opened up to all I want to do is just read specifically dark romance right now, you know? And so I think it's interesting when you have, a lot of times when you do have like a reading slump and you try something that's maybe something out of your comfort zone or something you're not really usually vibing with, and that's the thing that just sort of unlocks a level in your brain and you're like, this, I like this. That's how I'm feeling. But Emmerich and Ivory's story was so beautiful, and they're, especially leading up even to like the last hour or so of the story, some really dark, tragic things happen. And then watching them pull through that together and heal together, and then seeing their happily ever after was one of the most satisfying reading experiences that I've had in a really long time. I just fell in love with this couple. They're messy, you know? They're really messy, and I think that they're, you know, Ivory is a very vulnerable person. Like I said, the power dynamics in this are really interesting. It is a taboo romance in that she's his student and he's his teacher, but I will say that this book doesn't tread in that area a ton. Like, it's not drawing out the tension of, oh, they're in the classroom and they're attracted to each other. Like, that, honestly, that is there. It's a part of the plot, but it's a tiny part of it, you know? So I don't know, I think much in the same way that Priest is not going to appeal to a lot of people, I think, that have hard and fast, they don't want to read about a priest romance. I think this is also going to have people who are like, I don't want to read about a teacher-student relationship, you know? But both of these books, for me, were just handled to perfection with that, just sort of treading that line of showing you this is a taboo romance, this is a darker romance, and then also showing you, but look at how beautiful it could be. And I think that this opens up a whole nother room for discussion, too, about what makes something taboo. Why is it a taboo? You know, because I think in Emmerich and Ivory's case, it is very clear that they really are sort of made for each other. They're a perfect match. But because of the age gap and because of the teacher-student dynamic, in a lot of ways, if they had not just fallen into that taboo, they would never have ended up together. They would have never had a relationship, you know? And that to me, like, seeing how fulfilled and how much in love they were and just how much they healed and built one another up, seeing that at the end, whereas the beginning, the taboo was what was sort of keeping them apart, keeping them like, I don't know if we want to enter into this relationship. And the same thing with Father Bell and Poppy in Priest. It was just really interesting to me watching them sort of break that taboo and being like, we're going to do this anyway. And then look at the reward that they had, you know? So it was just, it was honestly just one of the best reading weeks that I've had in a really long time. Like, just kind of amazed and bowled over by these books. And they're books that I have not been able to stop thinking about this week, you know? Just beautiful, beautifully well done, incredibly powerful, incredibly impactful. Definitely, in some instances, were very uncomfortable to read, you know? But the reward, the end game, the overall completion of the story was just so good, you know? So, wow, I loved both of these books. They were both 5-star reads for me. They're both new favorites. I ordered the paperbacks because I just cannot stop thinking about them, and I love them so much. So these two books are the gist of this reading vlog, and we're just gonna leave it there. But wow, I loved them so much. So interesting. I'd be interested to know your thoughts on these books, or what I had to say about taboo and dark romances, and if you've ever felt similar, because to me, the appeal of stories like these is not the high levels of heat. I mean, of course, that's fantastic, you know, but that's not ever going to motivate me to really love a book, you know, just because that's not the type of reader that I am. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm just saying that's not what appeals to me. What does appeal to me is very nuanced, very complex character and relationship dynamics, treading through some dark gray areas together and coming out of it with a happily ever after. Like, that is my brand, whatever type of subgenre we're talking about. So, I had planned to read one more book, but I literally have talked forever, and I don't want to edit too much out because I felt like this has been really great for me to have a chance to talk about this. So, I'm going to end this vlog here with these two books with my highest recommendations. However, saying that if you think these things aren't going to, if these are a hard no for you, I totally get that. And I am going to say trigger warnings for Dark Notes real quick, because it was one that really is a big trigger for me. So if you're not interested in that, just mute me real quick. So Dark Notes does have a pretty graphically depicted death of a pet in it. So, I mean, of course, as a lot of other dark topics too, like loss of a loved one and sexual assault, pretty severe. But it's always that brutal on-page death of a pet that I just, like, have the hardest time with. So that is in Dark Notes, just so you know. And Jen from the Book Refuge, when I told her I was reading this, she let me know, and I was really glad she did, because I was prepared for it, and that is a perfect example of why trigger warnings are important, and it made my reading experience so much better for that. So anyway, I am super excited to read more from Pam Godwin. I just bought more of her books, and I can tell I'm just going to go in this rabbit hole and possibly not come out for some time. Thanks so much for watching this video, my friends. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to leave me a emoji, leave something from the night sky, like a star or whatever, moon, night sky. That would be awesome. So thanks so much for watching. I'll see y'all in my next video.